But you introduce yourself as Toasty.
Yeah. Like I'll literally to like people other than like, business opportunities, I'll introduce myself like as Toasty. What's up, man? I'm Toasty. Like everybody at the gym, like when I roll, it's easier to say what's up, it's Toasty than it is Andrew. But yeah, it's just one of those things. You just got to accept like what people are gonna call you. You can't let what other people are gonna say about you.
Is it not your fighter name by choice?
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things. You just got to sort of take control of it. Like because my last name is not necessarily Toasty. It's Toasty. You're tossing tea.
Oh.
So I want to say like 5th grade on. Kids can be mean. They'll be like, "Oh, your name's Toasty. You're like a piece of bread," sort of stuff. So like once you get into middle school, you sort of realize like, oh, I can either let this affect me or I can kind of just, own it.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then we'll go with that name today. Welcome to Elevate Today podcast. Today I'm with Toasty, and that is his last name too, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Your name is Andrew turns tea.
Toasty.
Andrew Toasty.
Like you're tossing tea in the Boston Harbor.
Okay. Well, welcome to the podcast.
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah.
It's so nice to finally sit down and talk to you, especially after watching your last fight. So how was that for you? The whole procedure, beginning, middle, end, or beginning fight to end?
It was interesting. I haven't had the opportunity to have so many of my teammates on the card. So, even the last time we had fought on Compton's card, we had Allen's fight dropped out literally the night of the fight. We ended up like with only 2 other fighters on the card. So having so many people on the card for the camp for this one was pretty cool. It was a lot more casual. Like everything sort of felt like, it was just another day in the office sort of thing. So that was really cool. It's just really good to sort of get my fight legs under me. Everything just seems like normal now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lot of Antdawgs people there.
Yep.
How does that go about with all you guys? Like you're what you call a fight camp, right?
Mm-hmm.
A community of people.
Yep.
And then the last fight that I was at was when Jacob fought.
Yes.
And then
that was at the Boardwalk.
2 people were pulled out.
Yes, Isaac ended up pulling out a few weeks before. I think it was like 2 weeks before the fight. Mm-hmm. He had some personal issues going on as well as like not being able to train because of those issues. And then Allen, literally nightmare fuel for me. It's like a situation I never would want to be in. Has our fight rebooked, has a new opponent. Comes in, weighs in. They both pass medicals. They both do the stare-offs. They're both in the back, wrapped up, ready to go. And then his opponent just says, "All right, man, I'm not doing this," and just walks out of the building. Promoter tries to stop him. Our coaches try to stop him. They're like, there's a big hoopla. And then eventually it's like, okay, we think he's going to do it. But then he just, lo and behold, just walks out. So it's definitely something I would have never wanted to experience. I know Alan definitely didn't want to experience that, but of all people in this world, I think that man is probably the strongest enough to deal with it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Especially after meeting the person.
Yeah. Did the whole stare down, did everything. They both did their little talks with the people who do the commentary. It seemed like everything was checked off the box other than walking into the cage. And that guy just didn't want to do that part. So
I don't blame him.
Yeah, Alan is pretty scary.
Yeah, if he was scared, like if he walked off, then it's better that way because that's not a fight you want to do that with.
Yeah, you don't want to go in against Alan not being 100% ready to go. That man like throws with some heat.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that last fight was really cool to watch.
It was very awesome. Especially he breaks his hand at the very beginning of the very, very beginning of the fight and then spends the entirety rest of the fight still dominating, still doing what he normally does, not changing his path to victory, just, persevering through the adversity and just taking it.
Yeah, and I saw him at Antdawgs the other day, just still training, even with his hand like that.
Yep, just walking around with a big cast, just changing, the different types of wraps that are on it to, facilitate what he needs to do in the day, still teaching the kids, still doing his own training on the side, still getting in where he can.
That's cool. And that's how it should be because, my dad, and we'll talk about that, like the whole connection there. But I've seen as he's trained wrestlers, like they'll come in with an injury of some sort and I'm like, oh, okay, well you should probably stay home and rest, and he'll like get mad if they don't show up for their workouts because especially that wrestler mentality, no matter what happens or what happens to you, if you have other parts of your body that work, then you train it if you're trying to be a great wrestler.
Yep. It's sort of I think about it back to a movie that I watch all the time that I find those little things that sort of help me drive. Cinderella man. It's like when you break your hand, you go through and you work with what you got to sort of make ends meet. Same sort of concept. Like if you're injured on your right leg, switch your stance and work on your left leg. Work on sprawling. Work on hand fighting, and in getting the wrestling. Well, wrestling specific, but like MMA and jiu-jitsu and everything else, work on getting that match to a specific area that can facilitate the part of your body that isn't injured. I mean, you're never going to go through as a fighter a situation where you're just completely healthy unless you're just starting out again. So the best thing you can do is find areas in which you can keep the fight where it's not going to be hindered by your injury and work around in those situations.
Okay. So when did your fighting career start? Because we just found out that you went to Gilroy High and did wrestling.
Yes. So technically my like combat sports sort of mentality sort of started when I was in middle school. I went to Brownell Middle School. There was an announcement over the PA system that they were doing wrestling tryouts, and I was a big fan of like WWE and stuff like that. So my little kid brain was like, yay, I'm going to go in and jump through tables and get hit with chairs and all that sort of stuff. And I show up to the first day of practice, and it was definitely not what I expected in any way, shape, or form. But it's one of those things, like I never really been able to be a part of a sports team. So it was one of those things where if I was going to do it, I was just going to stick with it. I wasn't going to jump out. Went through the entire first season at Brownell and lost every single match. Barely scored a point on anything. And then come to the end of the year, one of those things that I fell in love with. Came back the next year, my 8th grade year, finished out middle school at Brownell, and then went over to Gilroy High and just continued on from there. And then what transitioned me from wrestling into like doing MMA and combat sports was I had a friend of mine who I met in high school, Andrew Gomez. He had been doing Taekwondo and Muay Thai and things like that. He had an uncle that did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we sort of hooked up in around my freshman, sophomore year. And I was doing these little backyard fight sort of things with my friends.
That's so cool.
And he was like, hey man, why don't you, instead of just beating them up for like 5-10 minutes, why don't you just end the match right when you get on top? I was like, I don't know how to do that. And he was like, well, let me just show you a few things. He showed me an Americane, showed me a Kimura, showed me an armbar.
Oh my gosh.
And the next day, go out and do those things to those guys at the little backyard event we were doing. Came back to him the next day, and sort of from there, he brought me over to his gym, Politos Pro Fitness. We did Taekwondo every single day. Mm-hmm. We did Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, also while incorporating my wrestling practice at South Valley, because we used to wrestle at South Valley instead of at Gilroy High School.
Why?
This was back when Gilroy High didn't have the big wrestling facility they have now. It was before DC got there. It was just when Dr. Sanchez got there. So they didn't have the super accentuated what do I want to say, like money sort of coming in where they do now. Like DC gets a bunch of sponsorships that we just didn't have the opportunity to have. So the wrestling room at Gilroy High School was very, very run down. Like even the JV guys barely had space to work out there. So we used to work at South Valley High School, where they had just revamped the wrestling room right behind the swimming pool area. And then they had full access to a weight room as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so cool, because it really came full circle.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see that, because being involved with it, I seen that happen with Gilroy. I even saw that happen with Antdawgs.
Yep.
How there was like that gym location switch, and now it's like this massive gym space. It's so cool to see that.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of, it keeps going back to that little small circle we keep talking about, how like the world's so small, but you don't really notice it until you like experience it and take a step back. Like Antdawgs gym changed locations, and where me and Andrew were training at was literally at those locations just before Antdawg got there every single time. So me and Andrew stopped training at Politos, and we got the opportunity to do the MMA training at Gilroy Health and Fitness. Wow. And then we had that big location in the back. We had left or got pushed out or however it happened, and literally I think like 2 weeks after we left there, Antdawg moved their location from over by Rock Zone, over near Straw Hat and Round Table. They moved it over to Gilroy Health and Fitness, where we were at.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then right after they left there and moved over to that location they're at now, that was when me and him changed back over and went back to training over at Gilroy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And now you're at Gilroy. That's so cool. Mm-hmm. Does your friend still fight?
No, so he was my cornerman up until I think it was my first fight with CCFC, or it was my last fight with Bay Area Combat, one of those two fights. Literally after we weighed in, we went to go get breakfast. His dad had a stroke, so he's been like taking care of the family, taking care of everything going on with his stuff. He hasn't really had the opportunity to sort of come with me over to Antdawgs. I'm sure once all that sort of stuff gets sort of buttoned down and he has the ability to sort of branch out the way I've had the opportunity to branch out and follow my sort of dreams, I'm sure he'll jump at the opportunity to come back out.
And when did you start Antdawgs?
So I believe it was like around April, May, June, July. I want to say like July, August. I had a fight at the end of July where my gym had shut down literally, I think, a week and a half before my fight. I was fighting Temujin. He was the number one guy in the state at lightweight at the time. It was for a state title up in Napa. My gym gets shut down. And we're just waiting in limbo trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm training outside my front door, just sort of like hitting mitts and running up and down my block. Alan and me live across the street from each other. So I think he had either saw me just hanging out or something like that, or sort of hitting mitts again. And he was like, why don't you come over to Antdawgs? And he facilitated the conversation between me and I believe Coach Ant at the time, and sort of worked out a situation where I could go over there. And I didn't really feel comfortable jumping into a class or anything like that with only like a week's notice. So he kind of just gave me the facility area to get my work in, get pad work in, as opposed to just running up and down the street. Unfortunately, the fight didn't go my way. Sort of understandable with the opponent I had at the time. Temujin's great skill-wise. He's one of the better fighters I've had the experience of sharing the cage with. But I didn't really have a camp for it. I didn't really have a place to go. And then after that, from August on, coach just welcomed me in with open arms, and we've been rock and rolling ever since then.
I remember when you started, because that's when I was at Antdawgs. And I was always curious, like, why is he not taking a class?
Yeah.
Or, when you just remember, when you see someone that has that fighter instinct, you kind of just take note of it. And I remember that was about maybe 2 years ago.
It was like, it feels like it was like almost like a full year ago, because I was at the end of the year last year.
Okay. Yeah. So I've noticed at Antdawgs, like the last card, there were so many Antdawgs fighters. What's it like for you guys as a community to be having such big goals and being able to get there together and pursue parts of your dreams together?
It's not only is it super cool because you have so many people sort of sharing the same passions and goals. Like everyone's like, oh, I want to get to this thing, and no one feels out of place sort of talking about like, oh, I want to do this crazy thing that no one else is thinking about. It's also, I don't want to say easy, but like it's sort of like everything's right there in front of you. Like you get this better, and it's going to bring the next guy up to this, and the next guy's going to get up to the next level. So it's not necessarily easy, but it's just like everything is sort of right in front of you. You the pathway is set. You just got to take it. So you just got to keep going, setting the motivation for the next guy behind you, so that they can get up to your level, and then set the motivation for you to get past them.
That's really cool, and that's rare, because I've seen maybe not like at some gyms, but there's like a few that are into it for the long run, like whatever it takes, whatever the cost. But you guys have like a brotherhood, it looks like, where you're all close, and you're close, especially because you have the same dreams.
Yeah, and it's, going into like weight cutting and all the hard stuff, like everyone can have fun at class, on sparring days, or like when we're all just sort of hanging out and like shooting the shit. But when it comes down to, sitting in the sauna for an hour and a half, or jumping on the bike at 5:30 in the morning when all you want to do is just lay back in bed and things like that, when you have somebody in there standing right next to you who's like, nope, this is what we're doing today, this is what we all signed up for.
Yeah.
So it becomes sort of like like a brotherhood, like you were talking about. Like you all sort of bond in that moment of just suck.
And there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Especially once you see the other side of why you do it, why it's worth it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you were talking about pretty much the reason why you like stepped away from culinary arts and then got back into fighting. how was that decision process for you when you had to drop out of school and pursue a job to take care of family matters?
It was very difficult. So I had won a sort of like a scholarship competition. I went to culinary school in Sunnyvale, and they had done a little like practice competition, sort of like I don't know if you ever watched the show Chopped. It was very much like that.
Dang.
So we went in, and there was like, I think 4 or 5 other people there. We did a little competition, and I had won a scholarship to go to school. But if you've ever gone to like a trade school, like money for trade schools is extremely high. So even after getting that scholarship, getting money to go to school was a real big burden on the family. And then right after I'd make the decision to go to school, I think I'm like maybe 2 semesters in, my mom gets sick, and it comes down to like, all right, well, like I got to make a decision here. Either I'm going to continue being a burden, or I'm going to be the person to help us alleviate the burden. So it was a quick decision. It was definitely hard, but it's one of those things where, especially as like one of the few men of the family, it's one of those decisions you just have to make. Sucked that it had to be at sort of like a young age where I was like barely 20, 22, 21, somewhere around there. But it is what it is. It's one of those things you just got to do. I ended up going back down to Gilroy, moved back in with the family, and then just started working from there. Did a lot of warehouse work, a lot of sales work. I think I ended up taking like 7-8 years off, and then finally felt like I got into a point in my life where I could jump back into something I was passionate about. Mm-hmm. And it was really one of 2 options. You either jump back into cooking, or it was go into combat sports. And I sort of felt the motivation from people like Brianna, who's in the UFC, Noelle, who I went to high school with, who was in the UFC. There was a few Portuguese fighters, Chris Moutinho, Manel Cap, sort of just where I could see a little bit of myself in those people for whatever individual reason. And it was one of those things I was like, I can do that. There's no reason to stop me from doing that. So that's what I'm going to end up doing.
Mm-hmm. So there was certainty that you're most passionate about fighting in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know if I'd say I'm more passionate about that than cooking, but it was one of those things where I had examples to motivate me to do the thing that I think I can do, like, or I know I can do, honestly. There's people in my life that are doing the same thing, and it's sort of like, well, if they can do it, there's no reason I can't do it. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of people in my family that are owning restaurants and things like that, but there's plenty of people I know that are, wrestling in NCAA championships, who are out there running their own wrestling programs, who are teaching, wrestling schools, that are out there doing jiu-jitsu tournaments, that are in the UFC, that are in Bellator, that are doing all these things that I know I can do as well.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite style? Or maybe I don't know if you're allowed to have a favorite if you do all, but between like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, striking, kicking.
I would have to say wrestling, just because it's where I started. Like, it's one of those things, it's like your first love sort of thing. If you put like all the individual sports on a row of TVs, I'm probably going to fixate on the wrestling match no matter what.
Really?
Yeah. Even if like you put it up against MMA, like I love doing MMA because, it's, if you compare the 2 sports, I feel like a bit more difficult getting punched in the face to, implement your game plan. But at the same time, I have such a passion for wrestling. Like I could watch the most boring wrestling match and still find entertainment in it. Whereas like sometimes I do find myself checking my phone during a UFC event.
Yeah. And wrestling, I have such a respect for wrestling because of how intense it is. Like, in my opinion, the level that I've seen, I've never seen a more extreme sport. Like the kind of, even the strength and conditioning is taken so seriously in wrestling, and like explosive movement, and their bodies are so jacked. It's like once you go up doing wrestling, you're a different breed. Yeah,
and the mentality of just dealing with the suck is a whole lot different. Like you were talking about, where your dad had this expectation where you're gonna work through whatever is ailing you, sort of thing. I remember a story from my senior year. We had, I don't know if he was a freshman or a sophomore, but Paul Fox, when he was wrestling for us, the quietest kid in the room, doesn't say a word, doesn't complain, always doing everything right, always, acing every test, all that sort of stuff. I remember for Reno or something, he like messed up his wrist, and the rest of the season it was like bugging him. You could see it. He would rap it all the time, but he would never complain about it. And then lo and behold, after the state championship, I think he won that year. He wins the state title, goes and gets like an X-ray done. He had a broken wrist the entire season.
Yeah, that's a wrestler's mentality.
That's such a wrestler thing. Spencer Lee, last year wrestling for the NCAAs and winning a national championship with no ACLs. That's insane.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. And you did wrestling all of high school?
All of high school. I think I may have skipped out freshman year, but I was still doing like combat sports stuff like Taekwondo and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you did it with Gilroy High when you wrestled?
Correct.
Like, at South Valley.
Yeah, I was part of the Gilroy High wrestling team. We just did our practices at the South Valley Wrestling Room. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the little kids would still be like doing their after school program, or they'd be doing cardio and stuff like that. And then this Gilroy High wrestling team would be in the wrestling room grinding it out. And then after that, the few kids like, Nico, Leaf, who's like family with the coaches and stuff, they would all head over to the kids and run the Hawks program in the gymnasium.
Yep, I remember that. Our worlds are connected. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. Small world.
I know. I remember seeing like kids like Chase, like when they were running around barely at like the height of your waist. Mm-hmm. And now Chase Alate is out there just busting heads in Michigan.
He's doing amazing.
Insane.
And that was unique for me because being around wrestlers, I saw so much of like all aspects of their life, having a brother and then just being family friends with a lot of them. Like you could tell that they didn't want to wrestle all the time. They didn't want to go running and do the weight cutting, and they wouldn't complain, but you could just tell. And when I saw Chase Aldate doing what he was doing, I was like, you can tell he like lights up, he like glows about it, and not just after, but like everything he's doing, he's created wrestling to set him up for his dream. And like that's any sport. That's how you should treat it. Like let it set you up towards the path of your dream, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I mean you can make that extension to like anything. Like, yeah, I'm not in the career I want to be in. That may be true, but you should still conduct yourself in a manner in which, like, say your job work history is that is your career. You working in places and then having that recommendation to go to the next place is your sort of it's exactly what sets you up. So if you're not going to go ahead and drive towards your passion and make your career your passion, still what you do day to day is still what your career, your life is. So you got to go out there and maybe not give it your all, but put your best foot forward in everything you do. Mm-hmm. At least, I mean, maybe that's just like the wrestler in me, but that's just sort of how I see it. Even if you're having a bad day, you should still put your best foot forward in whatever it is you're doing.
Mm-hmm. No, like the fighter mentality kind of stays around my podcast for whatever reason. I keep getting fighters interested and wanting to come on, or like I want to get them on here. But it's like, to me, it seems like they understand a very simple aspect of life. In order to get what you want, you have to do the hard thing. Mm-hmm. And to get what you really, really want, you have to do the hard thing over and over and over again and manage to smile through it and to find the value in it and not complain and choose comfort or laziness. All fighters, in order to be good, in order to be great, you have to just be like, oh yeah, I like suffering. That's just kind of like what we do. It's practice. Yeah, it's part of it.
You can't expect to get something good in life and not have to deal with something bad up to that point. Like there's a bunch of sayings that kind of feed into that, but it's one I listen to or I say all the time to myself is like, you can't enjoy a rainbow without a few rainy days. It's mm-hmm. like anything good in life isn't doesn't come easy. You got to be able to go through whatever it is that you have to deal with to get the thing you want. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what's the point in doing it? Like everything's just gonna be handed to you, then you might as well not get off your butt to do it.
Yeah, and that's really life. That's what it all comes down to, because nothing gets super great. Nothing gets flawless and perfect. And I finally arrived to this point I want to be at. It's like once you're finally at this point where you're in pursuit of what you want to get at, that's when like you should realize you're as great as in a position as you can be.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Especially for fighting when it's just pain every day.
Yeah, well, most of the time. I mean, even today, we went to open mats, and then I'm sitting in the car kind of waiting for you to open the door, and then I go to stand up. I'm like, oh, I'm sore now.
Yeah, that's what it is. But why do you think people find such an intense love about it? Like such an intense love about fighting? Because I'm officially realized I'm one of them. All I want to do if I have free time is open mat or like go to the gym, go boxing, jujitsu, work out. It's like if I have free time, that's what I want to do. And I'm like, how do we get here?
I mean, I don't know what's going on in our brains, but there's got to be some sort of like, almost like when drugs are released, because man, it's crazy how much you go through every single day, and like then you go home and all you're thinking about is like, well, when's the next practice? Do I have to skip today? Maybe I can go in later today. So I don't know what's going on in our brains, but there's got to be something going on that's shooting up dopamines or something, because every single time I leave the gym and I go home, I mean, I get complaints from my girlfriend all the time. We're like, okay, well, when's the next time you're going to go to the gym? Because I got to plan around when you're going to the gym, because it seems like you're there all the time.
That's so true.
I mean, even Valentine's Day, we were at the gym and everyone sort of looked around and was like, okay, well, everyone here is either in a significant relationship or single.
Oh, a significant relationship.
Yeah, so you're there, you're in a relationship long enough, you kind of understand, all right, well, he's going to be at the gym today.
Mm-hmm. What was your girlfriend's name?
My girlfriend's name is Lee.
Yeah. How did you guys find your balance? Because a lot of fighters have settled on not getting in relationships because of people not understanding the sacrifice required. So how have you and her found your balance?
It's just, a matter of setting your boundaries, and like communication is always a big thing. Like no matter what you're doing, if you're not communicating like, oh, this is why I'm doing it, or, you got to understand that this is the way I'm going to be. I'm not trying to work. This is something that is part of me. If you're not communicating those things and just hoping they figure it out, it's always going to end badly. So as soon as we kind of got together and we sort of talked about, oh, this is what I do, this is what I'm into, this is what's going on in my life. It's sort of, one, became apparent that, oh, he's always at the gym. And two, it became like, hey, if we're going to do this committed sort of relationship thing, you got to understand that there is no, oh, well, you're at the gym instead of hanging out with me. Yes, I am. That is 100% what I'm doing, because in the end, you don't want to see me in a hospital looking at me, oh no, he has brain damage. Maybe if I didn't put the stress on him, he would have been able to train at the gym and not get in a position where he's going to get hurt. You don't want that on yourself. So I'm not going to allow you to make me change who I am so that you end up feeling that way. And then it's just a matter of communicating that, and because nobody is going to like to hear something the first time. As long as they sort of are accepting that sort of position, that boundary, if you will, that you're setting, then anything can be worked out as long as it's through communication.
Mm-hmm. That's very powerful. That's very useful. The boundaries, it sounds like limiting. Sometimes it sounds like a bad thing, but that's literally the only way you can get the freedom to be yourself and be in a healthy, strong relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, there's always options around that. Like you can find ways to spend more time together. It's just a matter of whether or not that other person wants to put in that same effort that you're doing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like my girlfriend doesn't go to the gym with me. She's not a big fan of going to the gym and waking up at 5:30 in the morning and doing cardio and all that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, it's not a normal human thing to want to do, to spend 12 hours at the gym every day. So as long as I'm willing to accept that boundary of her not wanting to go to the gym, and her willing to accept the boundary of me going to the gym, and then us just finding time in between that to spend with each other, at least enough time to fill both our sort of like, love language meters sort of thing, then all is well. And then as long as communication is still open, like, hey, last week we didn't really spend too much time together. Can we make sure that we do this X, Y, and Z so that we, have some time to spend with each other? As long as those communications are open and people aren't getting denied what they need, then there's no problems.
Mm-hmm. Crystal clear relationship advice.
Yeah.
How many hours do you spend at the gym in a week?
So I'll start on a normal Monday, because today's holiday, so like today was a little wonky. But on a normal Monday, I'll wake up at like 4:45, 5 o'clock, get ready and get to the gym around 5:30. We'll do a strength and conditioning class at Ants, and then at around 6 o'clock, we'll head next door to DC's and get a cardio session in for about an hour. I'll head back to the house, do some like showering, some breakfast, head back to the gym at like maybe 10 or 11, do open mats. So that's like 2.5, 3 hours of gym work. go back home, spend some time, because Mondays are my day off, spend some time doing chores, laundry, stuff like that. Head back to the gym around like 3:30, and then spend the rest of the day from like 3:30 up until like 8 o'clock at the gym.
Oh my gosh, I was not expecting that.
Yeah, so like that's usually like my day, and then Tuesday through Friday, you just work in me going to work between 8 a.m. to like 4. So like I miss that middle session in the afternoon if I can't take my lunch. If I can take my lunch at work, I'll take it at the gym. But other than that, I go to work, get off, go back to the gym, and I'll spend from 4 to 8:30 at the gym.
Okay, wow, that's crazy. That's a very insane schedule.
I mean, it's one of those wrestler things. I mean, it's if you're not putting in the work in, somebody else is putting the work in. And again, it's another thing. Like you got to listen to your body. Like if my body is sore, it's probably the one time I did get an injury through my fighting path. I sort of wasn't listening to my body. My legs were kind of giving out. Through one spinning back kick, and my calf almost like exploded. I have like a dent in my calf. So as long as you're listening to your body, you're not doing things like that where you're not taking the breaks you need, going home, soaking in baths, getting the sleep you need, things like that, then, you know, I can spend just about every waking moment at the gym. If they let me put a bed there, I would.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's really cool. And so now what's the next fight for you, or like the next process to doing what you're doing? Because your fight just happened. Yeah,
my fight I had planned to have a fight at the end of February on the 25th, and that card actually got canceled fully, just completely canceled off the books. And that's where I had to jump on the same card with everyone else.
Okay.
So originally it was just the 3 of them, and then I jumped on it like a week before that. So that fight happened February 5th. And then after that, we were planning on getting something back on the 25th because I love fighting. So like anytime I'm not booked to fight, I'm sort of like just waiting for the next thing. So they were trying to get me on the 25th. That didn't work. They were trying to get me on March 6th. That didn't work. They were trying to get me on March 18th. That hasn't come to fruition. So it's looking like we're just going to plan for the Cinco de Mayo card for Compton's in February, March, April, in May. And then once that happens, after that card, we'll probably be looking to get our pro license from there.
Pro license?
Yeah, pro license to do pro fights as opposed to amateur fights.
You need a license to do that?
You need a license to do either one. I mean, technically, you can do a sanctioned fight on like an Indian reservation that don't have to coordinate with CAMO, California Amateur Mixed Martial Arts Organization. But other than that, you do need a license through CAMO to do any amateur or pro fights. Okay,
I did not know that. This is the part where I'm like, the fighter knowledge, it's not there. So basically, the journey looks like you train super hard. You train like as many hours as free time as you can and your body will allow. And then you get some amateur fights, though usually local ones, right? And then how many of those would you say you do on average?
The average person probably gets in like 6. I would say up to like 6. If you're somebody like Isaac or Alan, who sort of like as soon as you got your license, you sort of already know you were going pro and you had quite a bit of skills already locked up. Maybe you did like wrestling in high school and maybe you just needed to polish up getting in your stand up or something like that. You maybe will only get like 3 or 4, like get past wearing the shin guards. Excuse me.
So amateur fights, you wear shin guards?
First 3. So if you or your opponent don't have more than 3 fights, then you have to wear shin guards. That's why for my last fight, I had to wear shin guards, even though I already have like 8 fights.
Oh.
So if you or your opponent don't have more than 3, then you have to wear shin guards. So some people will just get past that, get like 1 or 2 fights past that, and then they'll jump into getting their professional license.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that many fights, and then what is the fight called? You get your license for a pro fight?
Pro debut, yeah.
And then what happens?
You would get your license, find a card, usually in the local area, like, because you would have to get licensed in any state you fight. So if you fight in California, you need to get licensed through California, which would be CSAC. Say you then wanted to go fight in Nevada, in Las Vegas, you would then need to go get a different license in Nevada through NSAC, Nevada State Athletic Commission.
Do fighters know this?
Yeah. Every single fighter, when they go to fight in a different state, like say UFC, part of the process of accepting that fight is accepting the fact that you need to get sanctioned or licensed in that state.
Wow, that's interesting. I did not know anything about that.
Yeah, it's as somebody who's not a big fan of like big government, it kind of sucks. It's super annoying, but you know, it is what it is. It's what allows us to do our thing. But it would be a lot nicer if we didn't have to go through, you know, so many hoops for it. But it is what it is.
See, that's what I like to know though, and talk about the things that are not talked about when it comes to fighting, because I've never ever heard of that.
Yeah.
And what else do you need to get, I guess, certified for that license?
So for both licenses, your amateur and your pro, you need to go through some form of medical examination. For the amateur, it's far less rigorous. You need to do a basic physical that you would get every year anyway. And then there's also a few cardiovascular things during your physical. Like they'll make you do like these small exercises in the medical room, jumping on your heels, doing jumping jacks, stuff like that. And then they'll register your heart rate to make sure it's not overworking itself. They do a vision test. They do some blood work. But that's pretty much the extent of it for your amateur, and then you just pay the licensing fee, which is not that expensive for amateur. I think the license itself is like $75, and then the fee to process it is like maybe $100 or something like that, and then however much it costs for your medical and your blood work. For your pro license, it's far more expensive. I think it's like something around $1,300 to $1,700, something like that. And then the medical is similar. You still have to get like a basic medical physical done, same sort of cardiovascular stuff, but then it's just more tests. So like there's like an EKG, MRI. They actually do some brain scans to make sure you don't have like, you know, things going on with your brain before you get smacked around in the head. So it's a little bit more extensive. They also do blood work and things like that, but it's just far more expensive is the main difference.
You'd think it wouldn't be like that once you get more pro. It's like, oh, things get easier as far as that side goes.
I mean, it yes and no. Like it's sort of like becoming from an intern to an actual worker. Like they give you like the sort of like the training wheels are on everything. They like, this is sort of what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to go to the doctor. You're gonna have to go to the blood people. You're gonna have to fill out paperwork. And then once you become like a pro, you get like brought on to the corporation big time. That's when you're putting in notes for your orders and sort of
cool.
extending out your responsibilities, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So to be specific, what is your long-term goals with your career and fighting?
I want to go pro and like get into like one of those major organizations. I'm not one of those that's like fixated on the UFC. I really like Bellator, Scott Coker. I'm a big fan of Scott Coker. I like what he does a lot.
Who's that?
Scott Coker is the guy who runs the promoter who runs Bellator. He also used to run Strikeforce. He's like he's the antithesis of Dana. Like everything Dana is, he's like the opposite. Dana's sort of like mad all the time. Scott Coker's always happy, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like his sort of business sense, what he does, how he's like a fighter's promoter. He's always talking up his fighters. He doesn't ever really putting people down. So I'd like to do business with them. PFL, I like their system, being able to fight as many times as you can during the year and get as many points as you can for the season. And those amount of points are what win you the title shot, as opposed to you just like winning a certain amount of fights in a row. I like their system a lot. Also, the whole $1 million at the end of the whole competition is a real big boost for me. What is that? So at the end of their tournament season, so they do things sort of like NFL, where like you win a certain amount of games, or sorry, like soccer, you win a certain amount of games, you get a certain amount of points. So you win a certain amount of matches, you get points. At the end of that whole season, you get $1 million check if you win the entire season.
And what program is this?
PFL, Professional Fight League.
Wow.
Yeah. And then a really cool opportunity would be to fight for like ONE FC Horizon. Being able to fight like basically where Pride started would be super cool. Their rule sets are super interesting. Being able to like mix together Muay Thai and MMA rounds, or like do like the foot stomps, or not like the foot stomps, the soccer kicks and things like that. That all seems super interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. How are your kicks?
Well, because I started off my like actual stand-up stuff doing Taekwondo, my kicks are actually really well. I have a bad habit of sort of like doing calf kicks a lot during practice, so I've had to work my way around that. It's not nice to kick your teammates in the calf over and over and over and over. But other than that, yeah, I feel like I'm very good with my kicks. It's super fun being able to keep people at a distance and sort of just peck at them the whole time.
Yeah, but you said it there, because Taekwondo teaches you maybe really high kicks, really fast and really high. Karate is somewhat different because I was taught to kick with your shoelaces. And then when I started going to Antdawgs, I started kicking with like my shin and a little bit lower, and it was just so much for my mind. And then there's Muay Thai, which is a whole different style, it seems like it's more hip involved. And now I'm trying to relearn what I already know with roundhouses, just combining it all or finding what works for me. But like there's so much to the roundhouse, and it really depends on how you were brought up training to do them.
Yeah, me and a couple of my gym buddies outside of open mat today, like right before we were going in, we're doing the same thing. We're like, oh yeah, we'd really love to do like a taekwondo day or a wrestling day. And then as we're talking about that, me and a couple of the guys were like doing like little taekwondo kicks at each other. And you know, you can see little aspects of different what people like to do. Like Isaac really likes to do like Muay Thai and stand up and stuff. So when he's trying to do his taekwondo kicks, instead of going just straight up and down to the target, he's like throwing a kick and coming out and sort of checking as he's coming down. And it's one of those things like you have to sort of relearn depending on what you're trying to do. Like, you know, I may shoot a takedown on wrestling with my head on the outside so I can push, but is your head really want to be on the outside in MMA when someone can throw up a guillotine on you? So it's one of those things. Everything is sort of built around what that sport is. You know, you learn everything for a specific reason in wrestling. You learn everything for a specific reason in Taekwondo. And blending them together is an art in itself because you can't just take those same exact rules and put them against somebody who's going to be punching you in the face the whole time. Everything sort of changes.
It really is an art. And I feel it when I train in jiu-jitsu, and you can feel someone's expression is so different than yours, and you start to associate them to that expression, so you learn how to adapt to that. But it's like you have to know timing. You have to know the move that they have a tendency to go for, and it really is a predictability game. You think it's strength and skill, but if you can incorporate predictability, and not like you can ever really know a fighter, but you could just feel it, you could win.
Yep.
And that's a timing thing. But I just been finding such a joy and a love in finding every fighter's own like expression or how they started, the skill and the art that they dominate with, you know.
Yeah, me and a few guys were talking about a similar thing, sort of like how you get a feel for everybody in the gym. Like no one's getting stuck in those positions where like it's sort of someone's on top of side control and you're both kind of just sitting there because you don't want to move and you're afraid of what the next person's going to do, as opposed to, you know, once you get used to everyone sort of like what you're talking about, everyone's sort of movements, it's like, okay, I'm going to move here because I know he's going to do this, but I'm going to do this, and then he knows I'm going to do that, so I'm going to keep doing the next thing. It just makes everything sort of flow together, and it's super cool to see like how scrambles and jiu-jitsu matches between people go from like sort of these stalemates into like just free flowing, almost like water the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And that's once you go more like serious and you can combine it all and start wearing gloves to jiu-jitsu, or just never know if it's going to be more wrestling or more jiu-jitsu or both. Mm-hmm. And that's what's weird. In wrestling, you stop when they're on their back, and doing both, or training with a wrestler and they'll just kind of like feel a little bit off being on their back for a long time. Or if you're a wrestler and you do jiu-jitsu, it's like you're going to be thrown off doing certain things. Mm-hmm. Or like a takedown, the wrestlers just, they're going to be better.
Yeah, what it is like wrestlers like expect the match to have ended, and the jiu-jitsu guys like, oh no, it just started right now. An expression I like to use a lot in the gym is wrestlers dictate where the fight goes, and then the grappler, the jiu-jitsu guy, dictates when the fight ends. So, you know, I'm going to take my shot. I'm going to take you down. I'm going to front headlock you. I'm going to spin around to your back. I'm going to put you in a cradle, all these sort of things. I'm going to dictate as the wrestler where the fight goes. But when an armbar gets slapped on, when a choke gets slapped on, when somebody's tapping, it's usually because that's when the jiu-jitsu guy decided when the fight's going to end.
Yeah, that's cool. I love it how they combine. And at the Daniel Compton's fight, they had 3 or 4 jiu-jitsu fights at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I was kind of like bummed because I was so excited to watch it because it was kind of my first time watching jiu-jitsu after doing it. And I was like, dang, that's like, it's kind of slow to watch.
Yeah, well, the first match, I'm very biased. I don't like one of the guys in that match. So I've taken every opportunity to not be nice about it. So I'm going to not do that as much as I can right now. But that's probably why that
why
first
don't you
match,
like the fighter?
He's he's backed out of a fight with me, I think 3 times now, 2 or 3 times.
He doesn't want to fight you.
Something like that. So that's probably why that first match didn't go, too exciting. There were a couple matches that were very exciting. The 2 black belts that went against each other, and then like the one guy caught him in a rear naked, but it was like on his chin, and he basically like crushed his head the whole time. That was a good one. The match with Eris and Felix was really good. Felix's dad, his match was really good. So there were a few good matches. It just sucks that it had to open up with one guy almost getting trapped in a triangle and then just sitting there for 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's jiu-jitsu. Like, slow is smooth, apparently. And so when you're used to watching combat where it's like immediately fighting and you can start booing if they're literally not being entertaining enough. And jiu-jitsu, like, everything could be going fine, but they're just laying down. And I know how it feels to be laying down and being like, let me think of the next thing. But when you're watching it, it's so different than when you feel it.
Yeah.
And I was hoping it'd be more entertaining because that's like what I want to do more of. But once you know it, it's still always going to be an art you appreciate. Just nothing's like striking and kicking and watching that.
Yeah. For somebody who's like done a lot of research into like how jiu-jitsu started and stuff like that, it becomes a little bit more understandable because like jiu-jitsu was developed as like a thing where you give me enough time, I'm going to submit you. Like even if the match goes an hour from now, regardless of what happened from the start to the end, I'm going to be the one to tap you out sort of thing. So it kind of becomes understandable to run into situations like that, like the first match. And I think like the 4th match on the card where it was kind of just a stalemate the whole time. It tends to happen, but once you get people in there that sort of like know how to just, continue action, it can become a really exciting sort of spectacle.
Yeah. What is it like for you rolling with Little Ant?
Little Ant, a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. Him and JoJo beat the hell out of me every single time I'm going in there with him. Thank goodness sometimes he's out. I think he lives in a different area, so he comes over here for his training camp.
You say thank goodness?
Yeah, thank goodness. Because like if his off time, I get beat up on his off time too, I'd feel super bad about it. That man beats me up a lot. But it's crazy going, going with such different... so many different ranks of belts. Like JoJo's a purple belt, Lil Ant's a black belt. We got Jules in there that's a brown belt. We have
Redhead Jules?
Now she's a redhead, yes.
She has a brown belt?
Yeah, she just got a brown belt.
Oh my god.
Yeah, super good for her, right? She's super talented. So like even Alexis is green belt. Like there's so many different, and just from the like the coaches and the sort of like head people there's so many different like you were saying, styles of grappling coming at you that it's super cool being able to sort of pick from each individual one like what they do best and try to sort of incorporate that into your style, even if it's not like something you can do. Being able to defend something so high level from somebody, especially being something that they enjoy doing a lot, it is just going to make you better. Like even if it's just on defense, defending that same thing over and over and over is going to make you better at it.
I love it. And you can feel it when you roll with someone that's a higher belt level. Even though you don't win, you get in situations where you wouldn't know how to get there with someone else. Because like what I was taught and what is said is white belts, they have like a lot of spazzy energy where they're like on defense mode because they know how quick a submission can come in. They'll just use a lot more strength, a lot more speed, and they'll get gassed out a lot quicker. You roll with colored belt, they're not going to gas out. They're going to go so slow, and then you're going to be going for something, and all of a sudden you're like upside down or just in some weird thing that you weren't even taught yet. And that's the joy of going with upper belts because they know how to flow better. Unlike wrestling, it's snap down and pin. Jiu-jitsu, it's like, whoa, I've never been in this situation before. What do I do? How do I escape? Because you're really not going to get submissions in if someone's like a black belt and you're a white belt.
Yeah, I mean, I did get one choke in. One of my belts for Bay Area Combat, I choked out a black belt, so that was pretty cool.
You did?
Yes. For Bay Area Combat, I fought Raul Quintero. He's the black belt instructor for Jiu-Jitsu therapy in Watsonville.
Whoa, you beat an instructor?
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I understand. That is an honor.
It's one of those things like, it's definitely MMA. It's not like we were doing a jiu-jitsu match. It definitely would have been a lot different.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things I sort of mentioned earlier, like jiu-jitsu, wrestling, judo, whatever it is you're doing is a lot harder to do when you're getting punched in the face the whole time.
Yes.
And even just like learning to breathe when those things happen, like going back to what you're talking about like the difference between a white belt and a colored belt, like just being able to control your breathing in situations that are bad and not gas your entire body out in any one situation is super instrumental just to like keep your progress going.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. And even like knowing certain things, like with the chin choke or the rear naked choke, how if you do have the chin, you can still tap.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you do about that? Because it's like, keep your chin down so you don't get choked. Well, like if you keep your chin down, your freaking jaw will break.
Yeah, but that's one of those things, like if you're a wrestler, it's like, well, it's broken. Oh, well, we're going to keep moving.
Yeah, or like you shouldn't have gotten to that. You shouldn't have given him your back.
It's exactly what it is. Yeah, like if you didn't want to be put in this situation, you shouldn't have been put in this situation. Like if you don't like, getting put in a rear naked choke, stop giving up your back. It's one of those things.
What's your go-to move?
My favorite move in terms of like a submission, if we're talking about that, it's easily the Peruvian necktie. It's a variation of like the guillotine. It's like any single person that's grappled with me like more than 3 or 4 times at the gym knows immediately when I'm trying to go for it.
What is it called?
Peruvian necktie. It's so you have them in a guillotine, and instead of throwing their head on either side or putting them in the center of your body, you take your leg and you stand it up and you put their head underneath your leg, and you sort of use that as like a stopper, and you just sort of like scissor your hands here, and your other leg goes over their back. So it's a very intricate thing.
Really painful.
Yeah, it's very intricate. It's very eccentric, but it's one of my favorite things. I try it every single time I'm in there.
And if you can do it, then that's your move.
Yeah, exactly.
That's super cool.
I'm gonna go around and start calling it the Toasty tie.
Do it.
Yes.
That's really cool. I need to learn that one just because it's your favorite. Do you have advice for someone that is young, maybe in their teens or younger, that have the dream of becoming a fighter?
Just do it. I mean, there's one of my favorite lines I've heard is there are 2 times, the 2 best times to have started are back then and right now. Like you can't change when you should have started. Like, I'm not as good as this guy who's in my wrestling room because he started when he was a kid. Yeah, that sucks. You couldn't have started when you were a kid, but you can start right now. And there's nothing to stop you from going in and putting in just as much or if not more work than that next guy, that next girl, to get where you want to be. There's nothing in this world you can't achieve if you just don't go out and just do it.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. And what if they're young and they don't have the resources to start yet? What kind of advice would you give them before they have the opportunity to get on a mat?
I mean, I would say don't limit yourself in your mind to say you don't have the resources. Like I was saying beforehand, I trained for a state title fight out in my front lawn, running around the block. If you don't have access to a sauna suit, cut open some garbage bags. If you don't have training partners, tie some mitts to a tree, start hitting those things. There's always an excuse, but there's always a reason to push past those excuses. Don't be the one to make excuses for yourself. Just go out there and do what you want to do. Like no one in this world can stop you from doing it other than yourself.
Mm-hmm. And then let's say there's someone that's been fighting for about 5 years, which anyone can. I've been doing fighting in my own way for more than 5 years, but how can you tell when someone has the it factor, if they have what it takes to be a fighter?
I think it's different than like saying like, oh, what does somebody have what it takes to be like in the NFL or the NBA? There's no barrier to entry here. Like you can fight. I don't even know who you are. You can fight. Anybody out there can find some way to get yourself better. There's YouTube videos put out there by the Gracie families. There's enough instructional videos out there by Dominic Cruz and MMA fighters like that. Almost every area has some sort of local gym that'll let you mop the mats to get mat time in there. I promise you that there is an opportunity out there as long as you work hard enough to find it or work hard enough to create your own opportunity. I would just... The only thing I can say is don't limit yourself in your own brain. Don't be the person to say, I can't because X, Y, and Z. Just be the person that's going to say, I can because I have overcame X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. And are you wearing a Naruto hat?
It might be. No, Dragon Ball Z.
Oh God.
My Naruto one
I'm
is
gonna
at home.
get embarrassed for that because I know the difference. Well, my question is, there is that which we do, that which we say, and then that which kind of like resonates in our mind. And you say you had been influenced a lot by like anime and Dragon Ball Z. And is it Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball Q?
Dragon Ball Z.
Okay, good. Oh, well, I embarrassed myself again. Anyway, how has Naruto influenced your thinking?
Well,
Or Avatar? Oh my God.
So I don't.
I meant anime.
Yeah, I know what you meant.
You get where my mind is. I'm already
got
thinking
you.
about it all.
I speak to Isaac and Isaiah a lot. I can piece together broken thoughts a lot.
Thank you.
So it's one of those things, like, it may be super nerdy and stuff like that, and maybe super cheesy when you watch it, but like, you know, watching some dude just like overcome whatever crazy obstacle, like some, you know, crazy monster that could easily destroy the world, but through the power of friendship or determination or whatever it is that he's using or she's using to bring, you know, the power that they need to overcome. You can find power in something. You can find motivation, even however lame it is. You can find motivation to drive yourself to achieve whatever it is that you need to achieve. So it's one of those things, like, I find myself all the time watching it and being like, yeah, this is super corny, but I don't care. I love it. Like, I'm a real big Pokemon fan, and I know, like, I'll watch an episode or like watch something that happens on, like, on the game, the new one that came out or something like that. Watch a cheesy line that happens, and in my mind, I'm like, yeah, let's go. And I was like, if somebody saw me, they'd think so much less of me right now, but I don't care.
Yeah, I think Naruto, or why do I keep saying Naruto? Anime promotes such good messages, like at multiple times, you know, like fight, do what is right, and value the people around you and friendships.
Yeah. And
have you watched Avatar?
The animated series?
The last
Airbender, yeah.
That one is really cool. That one's the one that resonates with me the most, with like the uncle and the different Uncle Iroh, and then like the different signs. And that's like the same way that I see there's different love languages. Recently, my mom and I have been geeking out on every person has their own sign, and there are a few avatars that can be different signs. You know, some are waterbenders, some are firebenders. That's why they get angry really quickly. That's why they flow. That's why they take their time all the time, because of their sign.
Yeah. And I mean, if there's so many intricate little things about these shows, like you brought up Avatar. I mean, you can find so many different little things that sort of, like you were saying, resonate with you. Like Toph is a big character of mine that I really like, the blind girl.
Yeah.
And even if you do some research into it, you find out that even like the way she bends, even though she's an earthbender, just like all these other people, the way she bends is so much different because she's blind. She has to be in contact with like the earth, or has to not be able to physically see the opponent. So she has to be able to bend while also being able to touch her opponents. That's sort of like goes into what you were saying. Even though you can bend the same thing as somebody else, you can do it in a completely different way than somebody else. So like you may have like your favorite choke is a rear naked just like this next person, but how you set it up, how you get to it, how you execute it is 100% different than the next person.
That's really true. I might be testing your knowledge because I don't know if Avatar is like one of your shows, but do you remember the scene where he's talking about the chakras, avatars? That is such a powerful scene, because especially with fighting, like you have to have so many things leading up to your fight, because the nerves drive you crazy. Your food has to be dialed. There's so many elements of your life that if it's not in order, then anything can happen in the middle of the fight. But getting into that, what is called avatar state, where you're just like zoned in, you're locked in, you have the music. It's really cool to see that on an anime show, how the master is saying, like, if you want to attain the avatar state, then you have to face all of these demons. You have to face like these different obstacles that he had to face, which were the chakras. And I just thought that was like one of the best scenes ever.
I mean, going back full circle to what we were talking about earlier, if the avatar state was so easy, anyone could enter it. It's the same sort of thing. Like if you're unwilling to go through these obstacles and these hurdles to get you to the thing you want to be or the thing you need to be, so on and so forth, it's the only way to get somewhere good is to go through obstacles to get there.
That's so freaking true. I mean, you're making me want to like do fighting right now, like go boxing tonight. I think it's jiu-jitsu night, so maybe I'll do that today.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir every single day that if I'm not doing some sort of training, I'm probably sitting there thinking about wanting to do some sort of training all the time. If I'm not, at home hanging out with my girlfriend, or if I am hanging out with my girlfriend, I probably have my phone out looking up, who's the next opponent on Camo, or who's fighting in the UFC this weekend, or what other grappling cards coming up, or something like that. She's not afraid that I'm probably chatting with some girl, but she's probably afraid that I'm chatting up some sort of UFC chat line on Reddit or something like that.
During a date, you're like, can you not be on MMA right now?
Exactly. Andrew, what are you looking at? Oh, I'll put the UFC card away. I'm sorry. It's fight night. My bad.
Dang, that's when you know it's your love. And that's what we're supposed to find. Like, let us never forget that, like, the reason why I want fighters on this podcast is because they know that they're doing what they love. And in this life, like, you need to find those things that give you joy and passion, even if it's not all the wealth. But if it gives you this passion when you're doing it, when you're thinking about it all the time, like, the secret is to find that so that it can make whatever other things you're pursuing tolerable, or the harder things in life that come tolerable. Because as soon as you get on the mat, for your case, as soon as you put on the gloves, you're just like euphoria.
Yep.
Life is about that.
Yeah. And I don't think that, like, you have to be good at that thing. Like, I mentioned it earlier. My first season wrestling for middle school, I lost every single match. My current record, I have 4 losses. Like, losing or being not the best at something doesn't mean that you can't love something. Mm-hmm. You can love something you are absolutely the worst at, but if you find love in it, there's no reason to stop doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And tell me about your shirt, just because you're wearing it, and I want people to know.
So I'm wearing a Sugar Kids wrestling shirt. One of my old wrestling teammates in high school, Nico Villarreal, mm-hmm. He ended up wrestling for Arizona State. He won, I think, 2 state titles when he was at Gilroy High School. His father, Jason Villarreal, was like one of the coaches when I was high school, mm-hmm. or when I was at Gilroy High School. I was doing some work for him and his mom. They run a developmental disability center on Monterey here in, I think it's Monterey, yeah, on Monterey here in Morgan Hill. Mm-hmm. So I was doing some work for them, and Nico came out and gave me a couple shirts. I've been following him with everything he's doing at St. Francis, and then starting up his own little wrestling club up there. I do my best to follow, like, all my teammates and all the things that they're doing. It's really cool to see. Even in, like, whatever small way you're doing it. Again, we're talking about, like, how much passion you have for, like, whatever sport or whatever it is you're doing. It's cool to see, Leaf Dominguez going out and coaching in, I think, South Dakota,
that's cool.
Doing some wrestling out there. Nico doing his wrestling program. Chad Haygood coaching for Brownell. My old coach, Marty Serrano, still out there coaching. Greg Varela, who was my head coach in high school, coaching at Los Gatos. Everything going on at Gilroy High School with them getting DC and Duran Wynn to come out there and coach for them. Yeah. All the state champions they have, the likelihood that they're going to be wrestling for a team state title this year, super cool. So just being able to see everyone grow is another one of those things that motivates me. If I was wrestling around all these people, Jesse Delgado, who won a national championship at Illinois, there's no reason that I can't go out there and perform the way that they perform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, that's so crazy. And that's another thing. Feels like it's kind of like a local community podcast right now. But because we know all the same people, and everyone that I interview I know through someone, and it's the community, it's our people, but if someone does want to become a fighter, there's no better place than in this area. Yeah.
And it's I kind of mentioned it earlier, but it's like you don't even notice how good, like, or how fortunate you are to be until, like, hindsight kicks in. Like, when I was in high school, I never thought about, going to high school with 2 people that were going to fight in the UFC. Having Antdawg, who has been running a gym in Gilroy for however long and been fighting professionally for however long. DC, who ends up being a UFC heavyweight and light heavyweight champion, being the head coach. Dr. Sanchez being the principal at Gilroy High School. Jeff Garcia, who played football at Gilroy High School. Like, you don't see how beneficial it is to be in this area until like hindsight kicks in. You're like, oh man, I had every opportunity in the world. So you can't make excuses for yourself. You just got to be able to go out there and take those opportunities and build around you. I mean, even AKA is like right up the street in San Jose.
Yeah, and like that's what's really cool because your shirt is Sugar Kids. This is a wrestling program created by Nico Villarreal, who's family friend. But that's for the children, you know, and that's the time where these kids get a little bit introduced to it, or even in Gilroy High. But again, they have to start when they're kids in order to make it varsity in Gilroy High. Like, that's the reality of it. But like anyone in the area, here's the place to start.
I mean, Nico, all these guys, Paul, Willie, Fox, Blake Castle, Dominic Castle, all been wrestling since they were kids. And I didn't start wrestling until I was in middle school. So it's like, it's great to get these kids in there and build from it. But don't ever think that, you know, the 25-year-old that you didn't start when you needed to, there's always an opportunity. You can always go in there and build around those that have been building since before you even had the idea in your head.
Because that's like Alan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, me and Alan grew up together across the street from each other. Literally, I think 4 houses away. Since before middle school, we were friends. And neither one of us really had the idea we were going to be fighters. And then we grow apart, come back together, both almost 30. And what are we both doing? Fighting. So, I mean, you don't have to be doing something your whole life to be good at it. You don't have to be doing something and be good at it to do it every day. So just go out there and find whatever it is that you're passionate about, what you want to do, and just go out there and do it.
Motto for life, motto of the day. Well, I'll leave it at that. We are at an hour. I'm sure I'll get you on again because you do podcasts. Like, you were doing something with Daniel Compton, right?
Yeah, I've done, I think, 3 or 4 videos with Daniel Compton. One of my friends runs a podcast on YouTube called Story of the Fight. I've done, I think, like 4 or 5 videos with them as well. So I'm trying my best to branch out and get out there. I don't want the first time that I speak to the public to be, you know, in front of millions of people on the UFC or Dana White's Contender Series, or, you know, some video where I've never had the opportunity to speak to somebody and I turn into, you know, Talladega Nights where I don't know what to do with my hands. So getting the opportunity like this has been a blessing. Just being able to get out there and just, you know, branch out and get people to know who I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that you understand that there's like the level of the tell your story part, because people that support you and want to know you as a fighter, they want to know you as a person.
Yeah.
And it's cool because with technology, with podcasting, you can actually know a whole fighter's journey, and it's a beautiful privilege. So I'm sure I'll get you on again.
Yeah.
And the next fight and the journey, and I'm probably going to get more questions and requests about different parts of the things that a fighter faces, and so you'd be a great person to have back on. With that said, do you have a message for the community, for the people, on how they can elevate their lives?
Well, I've said it already once or twice, but, you know, if you find something you love to do, just go out there and do it. Don't make excuses for yourself. Don't let other people make excuses for you. Just find what you love to do and just go out and do it.
Well, thank you very much, Toasty. On that note, guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for elevating, and have a beautiful and lovely day.